The snow crunched beneath my boots as I made my way up the curved driveway, clutching a small, carefully wrapped gift in my gloved hands. My breath formed clouds in the frigid December air as I stared up at the dazzling mansion before me. Lights sparkled from every corner of the house, and the sound of laughter and music spilled from within. It was festive. It was grand, and I had not been invited. I hesitated at the massive oak door, suddenly self-conscious in my worn coat and thrifted scarf. The gift in my hand, a handcrafted photo album chronicling our family's life, suddenly felt embarrassingly simple. 3 years ago, I would have been inside already, lighting candles and refilling champagne glasses. Back then, I was the heart of every family celebration. But that was before I sold our family home to help my children chase their dreams. "You're making the right choice, Mom," Angela had said, holding my hand as I signed the papers. My oldest, Matthew, promised I'd have my own suite in his future estate once his restaurant took off. And sweet Emily, the youngest, had whispered, "Your sacrifice won't be forgotten." I had believed them. After all, they were all I had left after my husband died. I moved in with each of them, one by one. But as their businesses grew, their time for me dwindled. Eventually, I was living in the tiny room above Mrs. Dalton's garage, surviving off my teacher's pension and the occasional substitute gig. Now, standing at Angela's grand front door on Christmas night, I gathered my courage and rang the bell. Through the frosted glass, I saw the silhouettes of my children laughing, mingling, radiant. The door opened, and there stood Angela in a red cocktail dress, her eyes widening in confusion. "Mom?" she asked, her smile faltering. "What are you doing here?" I held out the small gift. I thought maybe I could join you all, just for a little while. She stepped outside, partially closing the door behind her. Her voice dropped. "This is a private party, Mom. Important guests are here. It's not a good time." And just like that, I realized I had become a stranger at my own family celebration. I stood there on the cold stone porch, blinking against the sting in my eyes, not from the wind, but from her words. A private party. Not a good time. I was her mother. The woman who stayed up countless nights helping with school projects, the one who went without so she could have more. And now I wasn't even welcome inside for a cup of cocoa on Christmas. Angela's eyes darted nervously toward the room behind her. "Matthew and Emily are here too. It's a client thing. Really, I wish you had called first." The frost on the steps hadn't yet touched me, but the chill in her tone seeped right through my bones. I nodded slowly, trying to save face. "I understand." But I didn't. Not really. Because this wasn't the first missed invitation. It had been building over the past year. Phone calls unanswered. Messages read but not replied to. Holidays suddenly too hectic. Birthdays overlooked. I had been patient. I had told myself they were busy building their futures. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't part of that future. I looked past Angela's shoulder into the warmth and gold glow of the living room. There was Matthew, my oldest, holding a glass of champagne, gesturing animatedly in conversation. In the dining room, I caught a glimpse of Emily arranging hors d'oeuvres on a silver tray. They were all there, together, and they hadn't even told me. I didn't plan what happened next. I didn't think it through. I just acted. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the weight of so many sacrifices finally snapping the last thread. I stepped forward. Angela tried to block me. "Mom, please." But I gently brushed past her. The warmth of the house hit me instantly, but it was the silence that struck me more. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. All eyes turned. I saw surprise, confusion, even embarrassment. But I stood tall, my back straight, my heart thudding so loudly I could barely hear the soft carols playing in the background. I took off my coat, laid the modest gift on the entry table, and said in a clear voice, "Merry Christmas. I'm Carolyn Reese, Angela, Matthew, and Emily's mother." For a moment, no one spoke, but the look in my children's eyes wasn't pride, it was panic. And that was the moment I realized something deeper. I wasn't just unexpected, I was unwanted. For a moment, the room hung in silence, thick, uncomfortable, undeniable. People looked from me to Angela, to Matthew and Emily, as if trying to piece together why this woman, clearly their mother, had arrived uninvited, unwelcomed, and yet unshaken. And then, a voice spoke up from the crowd. Carolyn Reese, an older gentleman near the fireplace, asked. He wore a dark tailored suit, silver hair swept back neatly, and his voice carried both warmth and curiosity. "Are you Carolyn Reese who taught literature at Fairmont High?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yes," I said, "that was me. I taught there for over 20 years. His face lit up. "Well, I'll be. I'm Henry Whitaker. You tutored my son, Mark, back in 2002. He was failing English and thinking of dropping out. You stayed after school with him 3 days a week until he passed. Now he's an editor for a major publishing house. He still talks about you." A murmur rippled through the guests. "I remember Mark," I said, smiling softly. "He had a beautiful way with words, just needed someone to believe in him." Henry turned to address the room. "This woman didn't just teach, she changed lives." Angela stepped forward, her voice tight. "Mr. Whitaker, I didn't realize you knew my mother." "Knew her," he said, letting out a soft laugh. "Your mother's something of a legend in our district. In fact, there's a scholarship in her name now. The Carolyn Reese Literacy Fellowship." I felt my breath catch. "A scholarship? In my name?" Henry's brow furrowed. "It's strange, though. We tried to invite you to the award ceremony last month, but the school said you couldn't be reached. We even contacted your family. They told us you were living abroad indefinitely." A strange ringing filled my ears. Living abroad? I turned slowly to look at Angela, then Matthew, then Emily. "Is that what you told them?" I asked quietly. "That I was gone?" The color drained from Angela's face. Emily stepped back, her lips parted as if to explain, but no words came. Henry continued, oblivious to the tension building. "There's also the matter of the legacy grant. $50,000. It was part of the award. When we couldn't locate you directly, we handed the check to your next of kin." He gestured toward my children. The room tilted. My knees felt weak. "They took it. They took the award meant for me, an award I never even knew existed, and let everyone believe I had disappeared. They had cashed in on my life's work while I sat in a freezing attic counting pennies." Emily stepped forward. "Mom, we were going to tell you." "When?" I asked, my voice quiet but sharp. "Before or after you spent it?" Suddenly, everyone in that room saw me differently. I was no longer the awkward woman at the door. I was a woman with a legacy, a mother who had been erased from her own story. And my children had done the erasing. A hush fell over the room like snowfall. The kind of silence that doesn't beg to be broken, it demands it. But no one spoke. Not at first. Angela looked like she might faint. Matthew's jaw tightened, his shoulders squared in silent defense. Emily, dear Emily, had tears pooling in her eyes, but said nothing. "I wasn't unreachable," I said slowly, addressing the guests as much as my children. "My phone number hasn't changed. I've been living above a garage down the road, teaching part-time, picking up tutoring jobs to make ends meet." Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Henry looked stunned. "But the school said." "They lied," I said simply. "My own children lied." I saw the shift in the room, the glances, the discomfort, the dawning realization that this evening's carefully curated celebration had just cracked wide open and something far more real was pouring out. Matthew finally broke the silence. "We were protecting you," he said stiffly. I turned to him. "From what? Recognition? A job opportunity? Financial independence?" "You're not young anymore, Mom," he added. "We didn't want you to have more stress." "Stress?" I echoed. "You think living in a drafty attic on a substitute teacher's pay was restful? You think struggling to afford groceries was relaxing?" Angela stepped in, her tone diplomatic. "We were going to use the money to support ventures that could benefit all of us, including you." There it was, the truth dressed in strategy. "So you decided for me," I said, "just like when I sold our house and gave you each a share. I believed in you. I trusted you." I turned to Emily. Was that trust supposed to be a transaction? Was it contingent on me disappearing quietly? "No," she whispered, voice cracking. "It wasn't like that. We just got caught up. In the businesses. The image. Everything moved fast." "And where was I supposed to fit into that image?" I asked. "You didn't want your clients to see your mother in a hand-me-down coat. I didn't want them to know your success came from a woman who gave up everything." The ripple of emotion ran through Emily's face, grief, guilt, recognition. Angela tried again. "We still love you, Mom. That hasn't changed." "But respect did," I said. "And love without respect is just control in disguise." At that moment, a server appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Reese, dinner is ready. Shall I begin serving?" Angela hesitated, torn between her glittering event and the storm brewing in her living room. "Yes," she said eventually, voice clipped. "We'll be right there." When the guests had filtered into the dining room, I turned to face my 3 children. "I want the truth. All of it. Where did the money go? The grant, the house sale, the promise that I'd be taken care of. Where is it now? Matthew looked away. Angela's composure cracked just slightly. Emily let out a quiet sob. I took a deep breath. Because starting tomorrow, I'm calling Henry. I'm accepting that job. I'm reclaiming that award, and I'm rebuilding my life, without secrets, without shame, and without waiting for my children to remember they still have a mother. Angela's eyes narrowed. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I said, that the way you treat me from here on out will no longer define how I see myself. You've made your choices. Now I'm making mine. Behind me, the soft clinking of dinnerware and muffled laughter carried from the dining room. But in that moment, there was no joy left in my children's eyes, only the sharp, cold sting of realization. They hadn't just lost control. They were losing the one person they thought would never leave. Before anyone could respond, a voice floated in from the entryway, warm, steady, and unmistakably familiar. Well, this isn't quite the Christmas gathering I expected. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway, brushing snow off his coat, was a tall man in his 60s. His salt and pepper hair caught the glow of the chandelier. In his hand was a small, carefully wrapped box. But it was his eyes, kind, steady, unwavering, that made my breath catch. Thomas? I whispered, stunned. He smiled softly. Hello, Carolyn. It's been a long time. Angela frowned. I'm sorry, who are you? Thomas stepped forward, extending a hand. Thomas Blake. Your mother and I were close a long time ago. Matthew's eyebrows lifted. Close how? I didn't answer. Instead, I studied Thomas's face. The lines were deeper now, but the warmth was the same. We had been engaged once, many years ago, before I met their father, before everything changed. We'd recently reconnected through a mutual friend, but I hadn't told the kids. Why would I? They hadn't exactly been asking about my life. I hope I'm not intruding, he said gently. I just came to drop off a gift. But it seems I've walked into something more. Henry stepped forward, grinning. You've got impeccable timing, Blake. Carolyn could use another ally at that table. Thomas turned to me. Actually, I have news about the investment opportunity we discussed. It's been approved. Angela blinked. What investment? Thomas didn't look at her. He kept his eyes on me. The funding is in place. We're ready to launch your education platform as early as January. You'll be the majority stakeholder in creative-led. Dead silence. You never told us about this, Emily whispered. No, I said evenly. I didn't. Thomas continued, I'm managing partner at Blake Foundation Capital. Carolyn shared her ideas for accessible literature programs in underserved schools. I saw the potential. We're starting with a $2 million grant. Emily gasped. Matthew went pale. Angela's voice was thin, incredulous. $2 million. I've already set aside the funds, Thomas confirmed. The project and the credit belong to your mother. He reached into his coat pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table. A hush fell again. I also brought something else, he said, looking at me. Thomas, I said cautiously. He smiled. No, not that, he laughed softly, guessing my thought. Not a ring, not yet. He opened the box. Inside was a small gold key. This, he said, is the key to the lake house in Vermont, the one we dreamed of all those years ago. I never sold it. Couldn't bring myself to. It's yours now, Carolyn. Whether or not you accept anything else from me, it's time you had something that belongs entirely to you. My children stared, stunned. But I didn't look at them. For once, I allowed myself to feel the moment, not as a mother, not as someone sacrificed, but as a woman rediscovering what she had always deserved. A second chance. I held the key in my palm, the weight of it both literal and symbolic. It wasn't just access to a house, it was the unlocking of something I'd buried for years. Identity, autonomy, worth. Angela cleared her throat. Mom, the family home. You said earlier you brought a gift. What did you mean? I met her gaze calmly. I found a way to buy it back. All three of them froze. I started tutoring the grandson of the couple who bought it, I explained. When they mentioned they were considering selling, I asked if they'd let me have first refusal. I couldn't afford it alone, but Miss Dalton, my landlord, agreed to help as an investor. She knew the house meant something to me. You did all of that without telling us? Matthew asked, stunned. Yes, I said simply. Just like you made decisions about my life without ever telling me. The silence that followed was thick with the taste of truth. No more pretending. No more platitudes. Angela looked down, her voice barely a whisper. So what happens now? I reached for the gift I'd brought and slid it back into my purse. Now I go home. I think about the job offer, the investment, and what kind of future I want for myself. Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling. What about us, Mom? I looked at each of them, 3 grown adults I had given my life to. My voice softened, but it didn't shake. That depends on you, I said. On whether you can see me as a full person, not just the mother who gave and gave. Whether you can build something new with me based on mutual respect instead of guilt or convenience. I turned to leave, the velvet box in one hand, my small wrapped gift untouched in the other. Angela's voice stopped me. Mom, can you ever forgive us? I paused in the doorway, snow starting to fall again outside. Forgiveness isn't something I can give you tonight, I said gently. It's a road we'd have to walk together. And with that, I stepped out into the cold winter night, not broken, not bitter, but free. For the first time in a very long time, I was truly free. 3 months passed like the quiet melt of snow, slow, steady, almost imperceptible, until one day, everything looked different. I now lived in the lake house in Vermont. It was just as I remembered from the photos Thomas used to send me in our youth, tall windows, creaking floorboards, the scent of pine outside every morning. But more than that, it felt like mine, not borrowed, not shared, not temporary. On that early spring morning, I sat on the deck with a mug of coffee, reviewing the final draft of the curriculum I'd written for the Westridge Outreach Program, the same program Henry had insisted I lead. It paid well, but more importantly, it made me feel alive again. Useful, seen. A text lit up my phone. It was from Emily. We're 20 minutes away, bringing lunch like we promised. I smiled. These meetings had become our new rhythm, one child at a time, each visit slow and intentional. No rushing back to how things were. No demands for instant forgiveness, just space and effort. Thomas joined me on the deck, handing over a second cup of coffee. Nervous? He asked gently. A little, I admitted. This is the first time all 3 of them are coming together. He gave a soft smile. Good. They need to see you for who you really are, not just the mother who carried them, but the woman who found her way back. I looked out across the calm water and took a deep breath. The road ahead was still fragile, like thin ice in early spring, but it was a road we were beginning to walk slowly, hesitantly, honestly. And this time it would be on my terms. We set lunch out on the deck, a little awkward, a little formal, but warm in its own way. The sun peeked through the trees, and for a moment, the weight of our past felt lighter. After we ate, I brought out a manila envelope and placed it on the table. Their conversation faded into silence. I asked you here today to talk about the family home, I said, my tone steady. The one I sold to help fund your dreams. Angela tensed immediately. Mom, we know we don't have a right to. I'm not here to revisit the past, I said, cutting gently but clearly. I'm here to talk about the future. I slid the papers from the envelope. I've set up a trust. The house will be co-owned by all 4 of us. None of us can sell it without unanimous agreement. We'll share responsibility, maintenance, taxes, and transparency. They stared at me in stunned silence. But why? Matthew finally asked. Why include us? After everything? I looked at each of them. Because that house isn't just a building. It's where your father and I raised you. Where we celebrated birthdays, cried through losses, and became a family. I'm not giving it back because I've forgotten what happened. I'm doing it because I remember who we used to be and I believe in who we still could become. Emily's eyes filled with tears again. We don't deserve this. No, I said quietly. But none of us really deserve second chances. We just choose what to do with them. This wasn't about restoring what had been lost. It was about laying down something new, brick by brick, on stronger, more honest ground. A home built not from sacrifice but from understanding. Later that afternoon, as my children wandered along the lakeshore laughing softly, skipping stones like they hadn't in years, Thomas joined me on the deck. You know, he said, slipping an arm gently around my waist, that velvet box didn't just hold a house key. I looked up at him, heart already full. I was wondering when you might mention that. He smiled, not with urgency, but with quiet knowing. I figured I'd let the family drama settle first. I laughed, and for the first time in a long time, the sound felt unburdened. We stood there for a moment, watching the reflections on the water, the shadows of the past growing fainter with every ripple. I think I'm finally ready, I said, turning to him not just about the key, or the house, or the work, but about my life. Ready to live it. To define it. To share it on my terms. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the lake and the people I loved, I realized something. The greatest act of love isn't self-sacrifice. It's truth. And in finally speaking mine, I'd given my children and myself the most precious gift of all. The chance to begin again.